What up guys, Miguel here of YugaTech, and with the coming of the Vivo S1 Pro, we wanted to see how it fares against one of our budget favorites of the year, the Realme 5 Pro. Alright, starting with design, the Vivo S1 Pro changes up the usual smartphone aesthetic by incorporating diamond-shaped designing coupled with symmetry as observed on the device's rear. On the other hand, the Realme 5 Pro embodies what it means to be a 2019 smartphone with great specs at an affordable price point. The S1 Pro gets a premium feel with its glass construction, while the 5 Pro is mostly made out of polycarbonate except for its display panel. At the rear, the S1 Pro incorporates a diamond-shaped camera module placed on the upper center that houses its quad camera setup. The 5 Pro also features a quad camera setup but utilizes a more conventional rectangular camera module placed on the upper left corner stacked vertically. For buttons and ports, starting up top, we get a noise-cancelling mic for speakerphone on both devices. The S1 Pro's 3.5mm audio jack can be found here too. Situated on the left side are both devices' dual SIM card tray, that's a hybrid slot for the Vivo, and a dedicated microSD card slot for the Realme. Also found here is the 5 Pro's volume buttons. On the right are both devices' power buttons and volume rocker for the S1 Pro. Lastly, at the bottom, we can find both devices' noise-cancelling mic for regular calls, single downward-firing speaker, and USB Type-C ports, as well as the 5 Pro's 3.5mm audio jack. So overall for design, we're going to have to give it to the Vivo S1 Pro for its more premium feel and slightly smaller notch size. For display, the S1 Pro utilizes a 6.38-inch Full HD Plus Super AMOLED panel, while the 5 Pro sports a 6.3-inch Full HD Plus IPS LCD display. Both devices' displays feature a resolution of 2340 by 1080. The S1 Pro gets a pixel density of 404 pixels per inch, while the 5 Pro has 409 pixels per inch. As for display protection, the Realme 5 Pro's display gets Corning Gorilla Glass 3 Plus, while the S1 Pro has no specified form of display protection, so that's sad. When it comes to actual media consumption, the S1 Pro definitely takes the cake here. That Super AMOLED panel produces vibrant colors with deep blacks and an overall punchy contrast. That isn't to say that the Realme 5 Pro's IPS LCD is bad though. We get good and accurate color reproduction on this panel, and it really isn't that bad to begin with. Both displays can handle viewing under direct sunlight pretty well, but your experience should be better on the S1 Pro's brighter panel. Overall for display, it's going to be a tie. I would have given it to the S1 Pro for its awesome for media consumption Super AMOLED panel, but because of the lack in display protection, which the Realme 5 Pro has, we ended up at a stalemate. For audio quality from those single downward firing speakers, they both aren't the best speakers out in the market right now, but they're not completely trash either. The Realme 5 Pro takes this one, as even though both single speakers lack in the low end, the 5 Pros can get louder with crispy highs. Of course, like I've mentioned countless times before, if you guys really wanted to immerse yourselves with whatever it is you're listening to, you guys should take advantage of the 3.5mm audio jack still present on both devices. Checking out performance now. For hardware, under the panels of the S1 Pro, we get a Qualcomm Snapdragon 665 coupled with an Adreno 610 GPU. The 5 Pro, on the other hand, utilizes a Snapdragon 712 chipset paired with an Adreno 616 GPU. For RAM and storage configurations, the S1 Pro is only available in 8GB of RAM and 128GB of internal storage. The Realme 5 Pro is available in either 4 or 8GB of RAM with 128GB of internal storage as well. For software, both devices get Android 9 Pie out of the box with both manufacturers' respective skins on top. That's FunTouch OS 9.2 for Vivo and ColorOS 6 for Realme. Now, we do prefer ColorOS over FunTouch by a long shot, but that isn't to say that FunTouch is absolutely terrible. At the end of the day, user interfaces boil down to the user's preferences, and at the end of the day, and besides, I'm sure most Vivo users are used to FunTouch and all its gimmicks by now. For those of you interested in performance numbers, flashing them on screen now. Alright, overall for performance, we're giving it to the Realme 5 Pro for its overall better performance numbers. Checking out them batteries, the Vivo S1 Pro is powered by a 4500 mAh cell, while the Realme 5 Pro gets a 4035 mAh one. Both devices get fast charging support, that's 18W fast charging for the S1 Pro and 20W VOOC 3 flash charging for the Realme. In our standard video loop test, which involves the phone's display and volume set to 50%, airplane mode turned on, and headphones plugged in, the S1 Pro got a total of 21 hours and 52 minutes of playback, while the Realme 5 Pro totaled at 20 hours and 30 minutes. So for battery, we're giving it to the Realme 5 Pro because yes, the S1 Pro did yield us a better score. Having VOOC 3 on the 5 Pro did yield us faster charging speeds. In terms of biometric security, we get both face and fingerprint unlock on these devices, and they're both pretty fast. That's an optical in-display one for the S1 Pro and a conventional rear-mounted one on the 5 Pro. In terms of speed, the 5 Pro has the S1 Pro beat by a few milliseconds. The same goes for the facial recognition, which is why the 5 Pro takes the cake here as well. Checking out the cameras now, both these devices feature a quad camera setup for the rear. The S1 Pros is composed of a 48 megapixel main shooter, an 8 megapixel ultra-wide, a 2 megapixel dedicated macro sensor, and a 2 megapixel depth sensor. The Realme 5 Pro on the other hand has a 48 megapixel main, an 8 megapixel ultra-wide, a 2 megapixel macro lens, and a 2 megapixel depth sensor as well. On the front-facing side of things, in both devices' dewdrop notches, we can find a 32 megapixel sensor for the S1 Pro and a 16 megapixel selfie shooter on the 5 Pro. Alright, let's begin. In this first shot of our Christmas tree, we already get an idea of the difference in color reproduction between these two devices. The 5 Pro's color reproduction appears a bit more saturated compared to the S1 Pro, making the latter appear more flat. Also, dynamic range is a lot better on the Realme compared to the Vivo. Next, we have Iron Man looking at Iron Man. Just notice the difference in how both devices handle the reds in the image. The S1 Pro likes it a bit more maroon, while the 5 Pro prefers it more orange, none of which are actually accurate. Next, we have the Skyway going south on both devices' default sensors. The S1 Pro's shot is noticeably darker compared to the 5 Pro's. Dynamic range is almost on par here, with the S1 Pro slightly blowing out the highlights more in comparison. The S1 Pro's post-processing seems to be a bit more aggressive in terms of sharpening as well. When it comes to their ultra-wide sensors, image quality takes a hit on both devices. The resulting images appear a bit over-processed, more so on the S1 Pro as seen with the very blue sky. Next, we have an image of alley editing. The S1 Pro seems to handle this more challenging lighting condition a bit better than the 5 Pro. The shadows in the 5 Pro's image appear much more noisy, and we get some pink tinting going on at the lower right corner of the frame. This ultra-wide shot really shows the S1 Pro's ultra-wide weakness when it comes to dim-lit scenarios. Muddy noise is all over the image, and the light coming from the window is much more overexposed compared to the Realme's shot. Last but not the least, we have RL editing this time, and the highlights in the S1 Pro's image is again overexposed compared to the 5 Pro's image. We can also see here the difference in color reproduction once again, as well as in white balance. Next, we have portrait mode. Our first subject here is Ira, and subject background separation is about the same in my opinion, and her skin tone is a bit more accurate on the S1 Pro. In these shots, we tap to focus on the Christmas tree and ornaments. As you all can see, the 5 Pro did just that, while the S1 Pro had a hard time taking its eyes off AJ. Lastly, for portrait mode, we have our yellow clock robot here. Again, subject background separation is about the same between these two, although the S1 Pro's image appears a bit more hazy. Next, we have some portrait selfies. As you can see in this first image, subject background separation is slightly better on the 5 Pro, and what's weird about the S1 Pro's selfie portrait is the background blur is quite minimal. With slightly harsh backlighting, the same can be said. The 5 Pro cut out a portion of my hoodie though, so that sucks. In this last image, again, very minimal blur on the S1 Pro. For all I know, it could even be non-existent at this point, which we in the office all found very, very weird. For default selfies, first up we have RL here, and once again you guys should be able to observe the difference in white balance and color reproduction, with the S1 Pro gaining a little more detail over the 5 Pro's image. Next is a selfie from AJ. The S1 Pro's image has a bit more contrast to it, while the 5 Pro's image appears more sharp. Though if we zoom into the tripod handle behind AJ, we can noticeably see more detail on the S1 Pro's image. Macro image quality between these two devices is about the same. They both have a similar focusing distance, and generally, images taken on both devices' dedicated macro sensor is very comparable. So overall, for cameras, it's a little bit of a stalemate once again between these two devices, though we're giving it to the Realme 5 Pro as we can say that we do get more reliable images from this device. Before we conclude, as per usual YugaTech fashion, let's talk about price. The Vivo S1 Pro retails in our Philippine shores for 15,990 pesos, while the Realme 5 Pro starts at 11,990 pesos for the 4GB RAM variant and 13,990 pesos for the 8GB of RAM. And personally, if I already owned a Realme 5 Pro, I wouldn't think to upgrade to the Vivo S1 Pro since I'd already have better performance numbers and a very comparable set of camera sensors. If you were choosing between these two devices, the only benefit you'd get from the S1 Pro compared to the 5 Pro is that Super AMOLED panel for media consumption. But then again, it doesn't even have any form of display protection, which means you'd have to be a bit more careful when handling that display. And that's my 2 cents on that. Then again, take what we have to say here with a grain of salt, because at the end of the day, it is your money and you guys should have all the power to know what to do with it. And that's it for the smartphone comparison. What do you guys like better, the Vivo S1 Pro or the Realme 5 Pro? Let us know in the comment section below. And if you enjoyed this video, be sure to smack that like button, subscribe to our YouTube channel, hit that bell icon so you get notified of future uploads. Be sure to visit YugaTech.com for the latest tech news and reviews. Again, this has been Miguel, and I will see you in the next one.